I believe that tracking our footprints on the negotiation path can help us trade peacefully using the Moa-Ad as a great motivation in the way forward.
So how can you make this one constitutional when you declare the other unconstitutional? But if you are intelligent enough and you compare the two documents, pareho lang ang laman halos.
What is Moa-Ad? Why was it unconstitutional? And what is the history behind this Moa-Ad? During the term of the former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front announced the creation of the Memorandum of Agreement on Ancestral Domain, or so-called as the Moa-Ad, a document that outlined the creation of a Bangsamoro juridical entity with its own police, military, and judicial systems. The armed conflict in Muslim Mindanao that began in the late 90s was in the nature of the independence movement. However, since the 1976 Tripoli Agreement signed between the Marcos government and the Norwiswari-led Moro National Liberation Front, or the MNLF, the terms of the negotiations revolved around the crafting an autonomous arrangement within the Philippine state as an expression of the Moro people's right to self-determination.
Tripoli Peace Agreement. It was an agreement between the government of the Republic of the Philippines and the Moro National Liberation Front, with the participation of the quadripartite Ministerial Commission members of the Organization of Islamic Conference and the Secretary General of the OIC, which provided for the establishment of autonomy in the southern Philippines. This agreement also provided that in the areas of autonomy, a legislative assembly and an executive council should be formed, and the Muslims should have the right to set up their own courts, which will implement the Islamic laws or Sharia. It further allowed the Philippine government to take all the necessary constitutional processes for the implementation of the entire agreement. Negotiations were held in the city of Tripoli during the period between 24th Zulhijjah 1396 to 2nd to Muharram 1397, corresponding to the period from 15th to 23rd December 1976, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs presided over by Dr. Ali Abdussalam Triki, Minister of State of Foreign Affairs of the Libyan Arab Republic, and comprising of the delegations.
The GPH, or the Government of the Philippines, has pursued peace negotiations with the Moro liberation groups in order to end the armed conflict, address the social, cultural, and economic inequities, and arrive at a viable political arrangement that will reconcile the ideals of Moro self-government, good governance, and national sovereignty. The peace negotiations from 1997 to 2000 could be characterized as a revolving mainly around security issues. Mechanisms such as the Coordinating Committee on the Cessation of Hostilities, or the CCH, Ad Hoc Joint Action Group, or the AHJAG, and the International Monitoring Team, or the IMT, were established. Confidence-building measures and ceasefire agreements were firmed up in the early stages of the negotiation. During this period, negotiations were conducted in the Mindanao without third-party facilitations or mediation. But the all-out war in 2000 halted the conduct of the peace talks and caused the withdrawal of the MILF from the negotiation table. 2001 to 2014, second stage of the GPH-MILF peace negotiations. This stage marked with the involvement of the international players, particularly in Malaysia as a third-party facilitator. The talks entered into substantive discussions outside of the cessations of hostilities and rehabilitations and development, such as discussions on the political settlement and the details of the arrangement for autonomy and self-governance. The draft Memorandum of Agreement on Ancestral Domain, or the so-called Moa-Ad, was finalized and initialed on the 27th day of July on 2008 and was scheduled for the signing on on the 5th day of August on 2008 in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. However, it was restrained by the Supreme Court on the same day. Serious objections to the draft agreement by local officials in affected areas and attacks from the renegade MILF elements on civilian communities in several parts of Mindanao prompt a policy decision. The non-signing triggered attack from the renegade MILF elements, and the more than 5,000 people were displaced as a result of the fighting. By November 2008, Malaysia decided to pull out its contingent in the Malaysian-led IMT. It would only be on July 2009 the back-channel efforts lead to the effecting of the suspension of the military operations or the SOMO by the government forces and the suspension of military actions or the SOMA by the MILF.
Idineklarang unconstitutional ang Moa-Ad sa isang desisyon ng Korte Suprema noong October 14, 2008 sa botong 8-7. Ayon sa nasabing desisyon, isa sa mga substantive issues na sanhi ng paglabag sa saligang batas ang hindi pagsunod sa tamang proseso ng pagkonsulta sa mga apektadong komunidad. Dagdag din ng Korte Suprema na hindi sang-ayon sa konstitusyon ng bansa ang pagkilala sa itinatatag na Bangsamoro Juridical Entity bilang isang associated state ng Pilipinas na nagtataglay ng kapangyarihan na higit sa napapayagan ng konstitusyon para sa anumang lokal o regional na gobyerno. Ayon naman kay Dean Julkipliwali ng UP Institute of Islamic Studies, maselan din ang mga bahagi ng Bangsamoro Basic Law na sumasaklaw sa intergovernmental relations at wealth sharing. Kabilang rito ang asymmetric relationship sa pagitan ng national government at Bangsamoro political entity na nagpapatingkad sa kaibahan ng Bangsamoro sa iba pang autonomous entity sa bansa.
Ibig sabihin, kung yung dati ang ARM, ang namumuno dyan ay regional governor. At ang experience natin kung sino man ang hawak ng regional governor ng Malacanang, para bang nakontrol ng buong autonomous region ng Malacanang. Dito sa kasunduan sa MILF, ang Bangsamoro Assembly ang magiging, I think, yung fulcrum of control dahil around 50 members ng Bangsamoro Assembly na manggagaling sa iba't ibang political parties ang maghahalal o mag-a-appoint ng chief minister. So, ibig sabihin, Malacanang has to control at least 50 heads.
Pagdako naman sa hatian ng kayamanan, kritikal ang usapin ukol sa block grant, isang lump sum na ipinagkakaloob ng national government sa Bangsamoro na hindi dadaan sa pag-audit ng pamahalaan sa loob ng 10 taon. Gaya ng Moa-Ad, questionable din ayon kay Gonzales ang proseso ng pagkonsulta sa mga apektadong panig. Nabanggit ni Gonzales na pakiramdam ng Moro National Liberation Front na sila'y agrabyado dahil hindi man lamang sila nakonsulta sa pagbalangkas ng Bangsamoro Basic Law.
Ang MNLF is feeling very aggrieved now kasi hindi kinakausap ng tama.
Yes.
At saka kung sa katotohanan naman, ang MNLF ang nire-recognize ng OIC. Tapos, yung sinasabi medyo sinikreto yung pag-uusap.
Paliwanag ni Gonzales, maaring ang hinihiling ng MILF sa Bangsamoro Basic Law ay hindi pa kayang ibigay ng konstitusyon. Kailangan kung gayon ng pag-aamyenda sa konstitusyon upang hindi madeklarang unconstitutional ang BBL.
Yung mga hinihiling nyo maaring nasa labas ng pagmasalukuyang konstitusyon. Hindi naman bawal ang magbago ng konstitusyon di ba? Dapat yung tinitingnan ng mabuti. Kaysa ipilit mo na ipasok yung hindi naman kayang ipasok.
Jerry Alcantara, UNTV News Worldwide.
Sa dami mga tindang, and I'll be talking about why is Moa-Ad or the Memorandum of Agreement on Ancestral Domain of 2008 was deemed unconstitutional, or why was it rejected? So on October 14, the Moa-Ad was declared unconstitutional and illegal. And on November 11, the Supreme Court affirmed its decision on rejecting the agreement. So first of all, the Supreme Court agreed that it was oppressive. This agreement was oppressive because the citizens may or may not agree with the majority or the leaders of the Bangsamoro Judiciary or the BJE, and also the minorities are seemingly oppressed, like those who settled in ARMM that are not Muslims or Moros. So the Filipino population was not consulted. In the end, it will be the people of Mindanao and the rest of the Philippines who will be affected by the Moa-Ad. And thus, it follows that they should also be asked about what they think and because peace should be a result of a consensus among all of those whose lives and future will be affected. So second, it was also deemed arbitrary or capricious, as it was very instant that it may cause difficulties in transitions, as the Republic of the Philippines would be dismembered and its sovereignty will be violated if this agreement was passed. Then the peace the peace negotiations were not transparent. The negotiations were held in secret between the two parties and the mediator, which is the Malaysia. And moreover, the public was not even informed about success along the way or interim results. The signing of the Moa-Ad was also supposed to ensue without the document even being published. In a democracy, this should not happen, as the populace has a right to know what its representatives are doing. So that sums up the Moa-Ad and why it was deemed unconstitutional. Thank you.